Today, public and publicness are ideas that demand reclaiming simply because they all exist on a resource which is scarce, and that is land. My name is Chaarvi Mathur and I'm an urban designer and a co-founder at Studio Aksharet. My research focus has largely been around understanding how we can bring about more public spaces in the city of Mumbai. Cities in history are remembered for their public spaces. From the beginning of time, examples of Roman agoras, Greek agoras, forums, and most importantly Indian chowks have all collated to the idea of publicness. Today, the definition of public spaces and open spaces seem to find their own area and demand their own existence. What counts as open spaces on paper, from planning perspective, does not always fulfill the demand per capita need of a person living in a city. The development plans talk about open spaces, recreational grounds, and so many other areas that contribute to larger city-level open spaces, but they don't always contribute to per capita requirement of public spaces. Every time I want to step out and take a break from work, I do not always visit a garden or a park. I'm most probably looking for a small little katta or a space under a tree or just a bench by a pavement. But I most often do not find it. It is because there is no formalization of such idea of organic public spaces. Privately owned public spaces, abbreviated as POPs. It is an idea that talks about creation of public spaces, not just open spaces, not just parks, gardens, things like last mile connectivity, safer streets, no boundary walls between plots, cycling tracks, safe hawking, informal spaces for informal activities and entrepreneurial activities to take place. So privately owned public spaces greatly depends on the idea of the right to the city. What POPs does is it gives right to the city to every individual, every private landowner. So as the word suggests, privately owned public spaces are spaces that are carved out and have a potential of providing public spaces on individual private property. Here the onus of maintaining and providing these public spaces does not solely rely on the authorities. It depends on every private landowner. Here he has a right to receive an incentive from the authorities, from the local authorities, and in return provide something back to the city. They do not have to be larger chunks of open spaces. They can literally be having no boundary walls, bringing together their marginal open spaces and allowing people to walk through them. Today, so many people in a lot of business districts, especially in cities like Bombay, Bangalore, are not having as much as last mile connectivity as these cities demand. What we want to do is, through POPs, help people walk, help people have conducive environment. So through POPs, we want to make idea of walkability, safer streets, eyes on streets a reality. Simply because there is no land remaining to give open spaces or to provide any more cycling tracks. As individuals, we must take up the onus of giving something back to the city. So the concept itself is extremely oxymoronic because it has words like private and public in one sentence. So largely people have always asked me that how do you think a private owner would receive this concept? Because when the land is scarce, nobody wants to give out even a square inch of their property for any other use but for their own. So here comes the idea of incentivization. What happens in this is, when a private owner agrees to open up a piece of their land, they need to be compensated for it, which the local authorities can do by incentivizing them. They could be getting an FSI, TDR, maybe a reduction in property taxes. So if people and private owners do comply by this idea, it can definitely be a win-win situation for both parties. And the end user, which is the local public, can have a huge takeaway from this idea.
My name is Mayuresh Gore. I'm a co-founder at Studio Aksharet. Now we are not talking only about walkability. We are talking about, if the sizes increases, we are talking about plazas. We are talking about podium spaces. So different generation of POPs will start emerging out of these. There is an intangible upliftment towards real estate. If somebody owns a particular type of office in a commercial area and wants a footfall, maybe POPs can develop that. What if we start mapping such kind of land parcels? What if we start locating what kind of areas might generate best quality of POPs. So I think the first step towards making this POPs is we can target areas which are highly commercial areas, or where we have large amount of population going for work, because the last mile connectivity is the most essential part for people. When people really want to move around in the night, POPs might really help if we start locating these basic necessities all over the city and say that yes, these areas might require the last mile connectivity, or these areas might require walkability. These are the first initiations. Then furthermore, per capita space making increases, confidence increases that yes, this can happen. So I think that is where the POPs can be generated.
Mumbai has an abysmal shortfall of open spaces per person. Right now we fall under the category of 0.9 square meters per person of open area, whereas according to UN Sustainable Development Goals, we require 2.41 square meters of open space per person. And privately owned public spaces, if put into practice, can help us increase that number and help us meet the requirement for future development plan goals.